Thank you. I have taken the liberty to start 5 minutes late because there was a crash between sessions. So thank you for being here. My name is Genti Bardhi. I am the chair for Tire and Rubber Division for ReMA, and I'll be your moderator today. We have an exceptional panel. Please ask questions. We are very excited to have our speakers here. Just a few words about ReMA. ReMA Tire and Rubber Division brings together a broad family within the American tire recycling industry that recycles more than 80% of end-life tires, and is part of an organization that represents 1,700 companies globally across 6 major commodities. Our mission is to strengthen supply chain and make a more secure nation by advancing collaboration between businesses, legislation and regulation, workforce and development, and awareness of the critical role that recycled materials play in the modern economy. And in today's geopolitical landscape, where supply chains are increasingly shaped by global tensions, resource competition, and national security considerations, this work has never been more important. The work of recyclers is not simply operational, it's strategic, it's fundamental, and is increasingly recognized as a pillar of national resilience. Through our conversation, we'll explore how the industry is adapting to these pressures, where new opportunities are emerging, what policy, technology, and market developments are shaping the future of tire and rubber recycling for the United States and beyond. Thank you for all the work you do and for your commitment to advancing our industry. Our speakers have already been introduced, so I'm not going into that, but I am leaving the floor to Carrie.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. It's an honor. And really, I'm going to try and keep it kind of short because these are the people that are doing the work. I'm just talking about it. But with that in mind, if we can go to the next slide, one of the things we know when we look at what we're doing at Georgetown is I am at Georgetown University. We're working with a master's program, and I run it in environment and sustainability management. And part of our goal is to really do half science and half business. We feel very, very strongly that you don't get good business decisions if you don't understand the science. And if you don't understand the business side of it, you're not going to have a successful business, even if it is based on something really great, fabulous patents, all the wonderful things that go into applying some of this R&D that we're going to be talking about. And so as we put basically our students through this master's program to do this, they're looking at a number of different factors. And some of the highlights that I wanted to share with you all is what I think is one of the most important studies to come out from a business standpoint in the last few years. And this is an actuarial report out of Exeter that talks about disruption within the market. And it's really, when you talk about actuaries, right, they are super into being accurate. They're not into hyperbole. They're not into worst case or best case scenario. They're into what will happen. So if we can go to the next slide, this is the article that's available publicly. But the next slide, this is the key takeaway for me, is that they're expecting by 2050 to have a 15% drop in GDP, and by 2100 a 40% drop in GDP based on the disruption that climate change will do. Now, what that means for a business, what it means for your businesses is disruption, supply chain disruption, having difficulty getting your raw materials, which is why recycling is so key, right? The fact that we already have a significant amount of product in the United States and in other countries that are sitting there in piles that can be used, that can be recycled, that can be put back into something. That's good business sense. It gives you a reliable source when supply chains are going to become more and more disrupted. We're already seeing that from a geopolitical standpoint right now in the Middle East, getting boats in and out. I was in Greece 2 weeks ago, and half of their boats were stuck within the Strait of Hormuz, and half the boats were stuck outside, and they're trying to get in and out. It's eating up their profits. So when we look at disruption, anytime we can solve for this by getting local content or raw material, we're actually, in some ways, making ourselves more resilient. If we can do that, obviously, and be profitable, now we've got a good business. So if we can hit the next slide. The reason we look at this is circularity sounds good. Maybe it'll save a polar bear somewhere. But in reality, the value of circularity is that you're finding more than a place for waste, as we talk about. You're finding a way to get access to material closer to where you need it. And that's efficiency. Most of the time, efficiency will make you money. The problem is that going from idea to learning curve to profitability. How much time is in between and how much of that can you absorb? So when you look at recycled materials, it's a no-brainer. Long-term, it will always make you money. The question is short-term. How much money has to go into R&D, has to go into scaling before you can get to profitability? But that long-term idea that you're being able to use your materials can be really helpful. The next slide. And so part of the reason when we look at this is we take our students through the exercises, and our students are everything from, we've got a 55-year-old that really wants to have for his investors an expertise in sustainability for his master's, to students that are more recently graduated, but they all look at graphs and charts like this one coming out of the Royal Society of Chemistry of what are the different options. If you look at tire, if you look at rubber, if you look at what you can do, what's the revenue? What's the market? How much do you get of circularity? But also, how do you scale it, right? This looks really great. And we are talking about revenue here, but there's a piece that I think is missing, which is a column that says profit. I mean, you can talk about revenue and that's great. And I'm all for RCB, but if you're looking at it, how long until we get to profit? What does that runway look like? And so we can hit the next slide. That's also where we look at this idea of creativity and really asking yourself, can you put cocoa pod husks into this process? And is there a benefit for it? The answer might be conceivably yes, this is a great solution, but now the question is this going to be profitable? Can we scale it? If we can go to the next slide. So I often will challenge the students with what we call heretical questions. And this group up here is already doing that. They're asking the heretical question, and many of you are, of do things need to be the way they've always been? And the response is no. We only have it that way because that's how we've always done it. The best part, particularly about rubber and tire, in my opinion, is whether you have an EV, whether you're doing more electric airlines, they're all going to need more tires. You're still going to have that piece of it. So this is going to be something that's ubiquitous, even as we see some of these other things change to more EV use, to even having airlines really double down, whether it's sustainable aviation fuel as the interim or into electric planes. And we've done some work in there. So as you start to ask yourself these questions, I love this line from Henry Ford. If I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, right? If you're asking people, how do we do recycled materials? They just want the material. They want it to function. It's up to us to have the story, to have the examples, to have the pieces on why it's beneficial and why it's worth doing. And some of that is really disruption, resilience, as well as the idea of moving toward profitability. So if we can hit the last slide here for me, I really want to challenge you all the same way I challenge my students when we talk about this from a business standpoint, but add in the science, add in what's possible, add in innovation. Think about all the different things you can get out of tires, out of tire waste, out of rubber, after, whether it is recovered carbon black or crumb, but what's possible, and really spend some time with that. Don't limit yourself on anything else, but what is possible? And then go to, is this scalable? And then ask, can we make it profitable? And that's usually where you get a really positive return. So anyway, that's kind of a summary of how we look at things when we're having the academic approach. But now you're going to hear the way more profitable and the idea of what does it look like in practice rather than in theory. So, transition on.
Thank you, Carrie. That's exceptional. That's why the purpose of this panel today is unique, because we don't only have the tire recyclers, we have the tire manufacturers, we have Bill, who is doing innovation in end products, and we have academia that can provide us data to enlighten our road. Next is Bill.
Well, thank you very much. Good segue from Carrie. So what Rubberform does, we actually make products out of recycled plastic and recycled, tire rubber for 4 verticals: parking lot and road safety, industrial plant safety, construction site safety, and public sector. So there's safety, risk mitigation, and compliance products. So I always talk about innovation at these conferences because I've really not seen a lot of innovation, and I've been in this business for 20 years. I've been innovating my entire career, from my first media company to a software company to now at Rubberform. So there's only been a few companies in the U.S., and we need more. So innovation is defined as the process of translating an idea or invention into a good or service that creates value for which customers will pay. To be called an innovation, an idea must be repeatable at an economical cost and must satisfy a specific need, not just a technical novelty or one-off pilot. So, of course, with innovations, there are risk takers. I've taken risks my entire career, and especially with rubber form. You have to create revolutionary products, high-value niche products, and create technologies that take on that risk. So we've really invented a lot of the manufacturing, both injection, well, first compression, that's where we started out, compression molding, super labor intensive. We're trying to get into a point where we're automating more of this. And we got into injection molding, so thick walled injection molded parts with very large presses, very big plasticizers, injection units, and now profile extrusion. A lot of these engineers we've talked to in the past said you couldn't do it. So can't isn't in my vocabulary. And I'm not an engineer, thank God, because that's the reason why we do a lot of innovation, a lot of R&D work. And we're creating the new markets within our 4 verticals. And when I started rubber form back in 2004, 2005, we were a Me Too product in our parking lot and road safety business. And it was very tough market to hoe because there was a lot of companies making wheel stops and speed bumps and sign bases. And there's a lot of imports now. And where we've now diversified into the public sector world, the industrial plant safety world, and the construction site safety world. So when you look at innovating a new product, don't get into an area where there's already major competition. And whenever we look at a new product, we always look at something, is there a market for it? And do the research and then figure out, will this actually sell and will people want to buy it? And again, trying to make products out of the crumb rubber and recycled plastic and really putting those two together. So really the innovation, think outside the tire. Really try to figure out what do people need, what do people want, and the next wave of the value will come from these higher performance applications, smarter formulations. Not just crumb rubber and polyurethane, okay, but taking plastics and other plastics and combining them and compounding them to injection mold them or extrude them. And again, products that customers will want to specify for their projects, and they'll want to buy at a price that's affordable. Because like a lot of times you got to get down to make sure that it's affordable to sell these on the marketplace. So my opinion, if product innovation utilizing recycled tire rubber is going to happen, something needs to change for our industry. Y'all have to be more innovative. Y'all have to think outside the tire. And the change needs to happen with all of you and with academia and the tire companies. And we all have to think about how can we make these products out of this recycled material. And again, plastic, rubber, combining, inject, what is the best way to manufacture this? So R&D and product development has to be done. Every single day at Rubber Form, we're doing R&D, testing new materials, testing new manufacturing processes, testing, asking the voice of the customer, VOC, voice of the customer. What do you want? What do you need? That's what my new job is at Rubber Form. My boys are taking over the company. So my new job is Chief Listening Officer at Rubber Form. Every single state of the union pretty much has a state tire fund where you collect the money. Some of that money needs to be diverted to this R&D process. Also federal funds, public sectors, companies like us. We've not gotten any R&D funding at all. We've done it all ourselves. And we spent really millions of dollars to develop this. Also, who should perform this? I think we all need to perform it, both academia, private sector, states, whatever the case may be. And we have to develop these new uses for this recycled tire rubber and the recycled plastics. So again, I can't stress this enough. R&D has to be done, developing these new materials, new next-gen materials, as I call them. And what states now have R&D programs? I don't know of any. Universities, secondary school involvement. We've actually worked with some of the schools and my plant's up in Buffalo, New York. So we've worked with some of those. And then again, public sector. So thank you very much. And I look forward to talking more about this as we get into the session.
Thank you for your passionate speech, Bill. Olivier.
Good morning. Good morning. So thank you very much, Genti, for inviting Michelin to be on the stage. So thank you for that. And thank you to all of you being here today, because one of the Key success factors is collaborations, as you mentioned very clearly, and without you, we will never be successful. So thank you for being here. And everybody is important. We have Regom in the room, in the automated collection and AI. We have a couple of innovators here. So that's great to be all together. I have only 2 messages for you. It's number 1, we buy recycled material, and we need to buy more recycled material, because in 2030, today we have roughly 32% of renewable and recycled material content in our products, and recycled material is critical to meet our 2030, 2040, and 2050 ambitions. I will buy more and more. That could be fillers, RCB, MRP, that could be recycled steel. All kind of material will be either zero fossil, so bio-based, the renewable material, or recycled. It's number 1. So we are ready to buy. And if we buy at scale. The key figure, today we buy 3 million tons of material worldwide. 3 million tons, 3.3. It will continue to grow because hopefully Michelin will continue to grow in the future. But today 3 million tons. If you think 32%, so 32% of renewable and recycled material, one big part is natural rubber, but more and more we will need more recycled material. Today we probably buy 50,000 tons of recycled material, probably even more. I don't remember the exact figure, but I will increase year over year. And if we do this, is to fight against climate change. So we have an ambition of net zero, is to help to have local resilient supply chain. If you create recycled material coming from the US, you create local job and the supply chain will be more resilient. And we see all this geopolitical disruption around the world is even more impactful. So we have multiple reasons why we do it, but we do it. And we didn't do, because one of the key issues is the value chain is not at scale, and we need scale. Quick video, probably we can play a video. Okay, I will just remember Michelin is a restaurant guide as well. It's the same company, so the same company putting the stars. So I will show you the art of cooking a sustainable tire. Maybe we can put the sound. And today is already 32%. So way to go. We need you.
Thank you, Olivier. That was amazing. Nick, stage is yours, please.
All right. Thank you. And thank you everybody for being here. I think, one of the things that's striking about, tire recycling as a topic is just sort of the magnitude, the amount of end-of-life tires that are generated each year, which to me is a tremendous opportunity because of the uniformity of that stream. But it also means that not any single one of us and not any single solution that's represented here is the entire solution of the problem. So very refreshing to see, the diversity in the crowd and the different solutions being brought to the table. I'll spend a minute before we get started in the panel just talking about sort of what that means for us in Bridgestone, and sort of how and why we think about the circular economy. So this chart, I realize the words on here will be very small. I don't expect you to read any of them, but what I really want to call attention to here is the fact that this is how we've charted our business. It happens to look like a bunch of circles, which is really interesting when you look at it through the lens that we are of recycling, but it's actually core to how we think about our business more broadly, just in terms of how we go to market, how we interact with the marketplace and our customers. So, on the right side there, the pink part, is sort of think of that as tires produced and in customers' hands. So that's really about, how do we extend the life of those tires, make them more useful, make them perform better. It's things, like longer wear life in a product. It's things like driver behavior management for fleets, that helps to extend and extend the useful life of a tire. And then as you go further back in the circle, and this really starts to mirror some, Ellen MacArthur type concepts and things like that, but then you go back to, tire to rubber, and that captures things like our retread program, or the leading provider of retreaded tires for truck fleets in the US. And that obviously, you can debate definitions, whether you call that recycling or reuse, but major element core to our business model that long predates really significant efforts around tire recycling. And then you go back further and you get to some of the topics that we just saw represented, bringing that tire material back to raw materials that are useful again for production of new tires without compromises to performance. And that includes, and we think of that through our sustainable and circular materials. Where are we today on that? 39.9% globally is how we measure our material circularity number, which again captures sustainable, so bio-derived, and also circular materials in that number. Decarbonization, we've been on a pathway for some time now. We're down 62% versus our 2011 benchmark for Scope 1 and Scope 2. And nature positive is another piece that we talk about this a lot inside of our company. And this is, obviously all the sustainability topics we talk about, affect this at least indirectly, but we also have direct interaction with the environment. We have some significant, operations around natural rubber, industry, which I think is particularly relevant here. And we support a lot of smallholder farming, also, large plantations globally, in that industry. So recycling actions specifically, and we operate obviously as a global company. We operate across different geographic pools, which gives us the benefit of some breadth to these initiatives as we go about them. So you can see we have efforts across pyrolysis, across gasification, across bioprocessing, and different partners we work with in different areas of the globe, which has been a big benefit to us in helping us advance these things further and faster. We're pretty big users of these technologies in our products. We don't always talk about it, meaning we don't necessarily take credit for those sustainability attributes, but we are heavy users of these products, whether it's regenerated rubber, whether it's recovered carbon black, whether it's sustainable carbon blacks coming from pyrolysis oil, and different things. So the challenges, we obviously have technological limitations, which is as much an opportunity as a challenge. I think there are a lot of exciting things happening in the industry around this. economic and business barriers, this is very real, as everybody addresses every day. And this is something in a lot of cases we're paying a premium. There's an additional cost to promote recycling of the products today. As technology and business ecosystems evolve, hopefully that becomes a profit center across the board. Structural and systemic challenges, I think, are quite similar there, but start to bring in, regulatory landscape and things like that. And then behavioral and cultural resistance. This is really, you can spend a lot of time going product by product across the recycled product landscape, but it's difficult to get people to adopt things that are new, even when the rationale is sound. So how do we get there? Business model and ecosystem development, working collectively across the different groups that are represented here. Technology and co-creation and willingness to experiment and playing the long game. Sometimes, like I said, doing things even if it's at a loss today because it helps us get there in the future. So thank you for letting me spend a moment and looking forward to a continued discussion here.
Absolutely. I'm going to challenge a little the panel for 1 second here. As I've been, I'm not going to stick to the script for a second. As I was listening to innovation, what Michelin does with Bridgestone, Georgetown, Bill, let me ask you a question. Why aren't all tires recycling as we speak? What's the biggest barrier? Is it legislation? Is it material recovery? Is logistics? Why aren't we doing that? What's your opinion?
Yeah, I'll start there because I think that question is probably even more acute in the tire industry than elsewhere, because we have a lot of advantages, a lot of tailwinds at our back. The waste stream comes out of our industry in a uniform way. The collection is almost 100%. Enough regulation exists to keep the supply chain partners, generally compliant. I'm not going to focus on the small proportion of bad actors that get, tires out into the wild. That's a different type of thing to manage, but a lot of tailwinds at our back. That means we're collecting this stream that looks pretty homogeneous, and that's very useful. You talked about some of the, impact absorption, sound absorption, antioxidant properties, performance, as additives into asphalt and things like that. So the issue is not in the collection. The issue is not in the usefulness. But I think really what holds us up is there's just such a high volume of end-of-life tire material. And there's a need for innovation to bring new ideas, new destinations where that material can find its way to. So we try to do our part, bring in more and more recycled tire materials into tires. That'll never be 100% of the industry, and that's the biggest thing that we really look for or are excited about developing, is having more and more use cases down the line.
Thank you. Would you like to add something, Olivier?
No, I think, Nick, when you presented your slide, you were super clear and fully support what you were saying. And it's really to transform this waste into value and finding the bridge between the waste that we have and the value. There's no real waste. If we can transform this material into valuable material, we are ready to buy this value. And it's the same for open loop solutions. So it's all about transforming that, and there's multiple dimensions, the technology, the legislation, the traceability, all the technologies along the value chain, which needs to be improved, but we are getting there. There's a good momentum in this industry, and one of the reasons we are here is to show, I think there's a momentum because we are here together, so that's good. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thinking about innovation, Bill, I don't know any other company apart from Pretread who does that currently, that approaches innovation in a way that it's testing, it's critical, it's showing every day. It's even hard for us as technological supplier to stay behind and to really watch what you're doing every day. How do you approach that? There are many companies out there. There is a lot where we have a lot of commodities, but we are in the vertical system, we're limited. How do we approach that? How do we make a new product?
So as I said, we look at our 4 verticals and then we try to build new safety, risk mitigation, and compliance products for those. But we're kind of at a disadvantage because the Northern Brethren, Canada, has a subsidy program, which is very tough to compete with. That's why there hasn't been a lot of new development here in the state. I don't think a lot of you actually know that the Canadian government, each of the provinces, subsidize and I hate subsidies. Okay. I don't think subsidies and incentives are really good, in terms of, competition. And my company loses millions of dollars, in our public sector category, in our parking lot and road sector. And they subsidize it about 50%. And then they subsidize the shipping, aka dumping, out of their country 100%. So if I send something to California, it costs me $4,500 for a truckload. It's zero for that customer in California, which is usually a public entity. And so our tax dollars and goes to Ottawa, not DC or that state capital. So that needs to change. Okay. And I could go and hire a trade attorney in DC for $1 million and put together a petition to get them tariffed. I just don't have $1 million burning a hole in my pocket. And if you look at our sector back when I started, there's probably 4 or 5 competitors that did similar products to us. They're out of business. And again, this is a very tough business because, you need to understand your cost of doing business. You need to understand what your competition is like. And we're getting competition from China too. Okay. They rip off my patents and you go down, I drive down the street and I see a wheel stop and boy, that looks like a rubber form wheel stop. And I drive up and it's from China, and the Chinese, define recycling very different than we do. Okay. They put a lot of toxic material in and their recycled material isn't how we define recycled material, because we've had it tested. And again, we lose a lot of business there, and also over the speed bump. So I can, walk you around here, this actually hotel, and show you where these products are made and where they came from and who made them and what they're made out of. If that's something we have to deal with on a daily basis. So in terms of government intervention, the government needs to get involved in making sure that we're on an even playing field with, putting the HTC code, the Harmony Tariff Code, coming into the country is correct. And what the materials coming into the country is safe for our environment, because you get leaching as well, leaching into our groundwater system. So in terms of environmentalists, they should be aware of that. But because it's such a small business, it's not $1 billion industry, it's $1 million industry, it kind of goes by the wayside. So that I need some help. We all need help to develop that marketplace. And in terms of looking at new products, just the material is now that we've developed this profile extrusion, thick walled and pelletizing it and injection molding, that's where the key is, because compression molding is very labor intensive. And actually that's one of our big projects now that we're working on is how do you automate compression molding and have a repeatable process? And it's not easy. Okay. So
Thank you. Carrie, looking at, listening to Bill, to Olivier, to Nick with Bridgestone, it comes to mind, what is Georgetown doing currently to have a global impact in the next culture of leadership? Are we working with the leaders in the industry? We talk about the capstone projects, how we're approaching that to bring the industry together and help them with data-driven when it comes to research and impact?
Yeah, my coping mechanism, when I talked about the 40% disruption in GDP, my coping mechanism is that I'm putting roughly 50 students out there that I think are going to make an impact and are already doing some pretty cool things. So we've got alumni for the last number of years, and over the years, our capstone projects, we don't charge companies, but we work with them and we partner with them on basically figuring out the things we talked about. So they do R&D, and some of the projects are very technical. Some are more business oriented, but you have to understand the technology. For example, they did a demand analysis for a Series A funding for a startup that was using sequestered CO2 as their natural coolant in the HVAC industry, basically completely taking PFAS out of the equation. And so when you look at that demand analysis, while the students were working on it before they had graduated, that company got their Series A funding. And that, like what you see a student just being like, I can do this. I can partner with companies. I can help develop demand analysis. But they can't do that well if they don't understand the science and the technology and the value of having something that is not only sequestered CO2, but PFAS. Right now, I'm talking to actually Volkswagen in Brazil about working with them on a business model because they actually have a huge problem in Brazil with Volkswagen getting stolen because there's such a shortage of parts. So they're trying to take the end of life vehicles. We haven't gotten into tires yet. I'll let you guys know. Right now, we're just working on the rest of the car, but basically taking it apart for parts to actually drop the crime rate. So in this case, we're actually doing environmental justice because from a standpoint of these things aren't getting dumped, they aren't getting chopped with some of the stuff getting buried, God knows where. You're also dropping the crime rate in general. And you're also doing a business model where more people are willing to buy a Volkswagen in Brazil because of it. So oftentimes we're coming in and looking at what does it need to happen to scale something, to look at it from a scientific or a chemical standpoint, and then also adding in that business piece. And so our goal really is to support companies and partner with them to be able to do this. We're working with L'Oreal this year right now because of SB 54 to figure out how they can have less plastic in their packaging, particularly in California, but they know New York is coming around the corner. They know this is expanding. They're already doing it in the EU for L'Oreal. And so we're really working with them to do that. And our students are coming up with business models. They literally said, surprise us. And so I can't talk about because we have NDAs, but our students are presenting new business models and new opportunities to them actually in 2 weeks. So I'll be heading up to New York for that. So really some of it's imagination without ignoring time, money, profit, and all the business and scientific, challenges that we have. But if you can challenge someone to come in with fresh eyes, sometimes that has a really good ROI.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn the question to a tougher audience. I'd love at this moment to see if anybody has any questions. It's a good time to see if our audience would like to ask any questions. Don't be afraid. Don't. Here, I'll call some. Eric, I know you have questions.
So the question, since I know he doesn't have a microphone, he asked how many end-of-life tires are generated per person per year in the United States. You get the small numbers and you have the benefit, you get the round, liberally without it sounding, or without hurting you too much, but it's about a tire per person is how we think about it. And maps pretty closely actually, because when we think about solving specific problems, there becomes a more localized geography to it. It maps pretty closely, certainly on the passenger car side, it maps very closely to the population. And on the truck tire side, it maps more closely to transit corridors.
So I was listening to you earlier and you said what's prohibiting the tire recycling is because there's just too many tires. Did I hear that correctly? I was trying to figure out what you were saying, but.
Yes. So I think there actually are a lot of good things happening out there, but it's not enough to capture that one tire per every person in the country. I think the hierarchy that we have up on the screen is maybe helpful to think about that. Our performance today as an industry, we have, I think of it as roughly kind of a third of tires going into either material recovery, energy recovery, or landfill or other, meaning exported and things that generally the other is not the top of the stack on the hierarchy. So the things are happening to where there's a healthy market of recycling happening, but that market is not big enough to capture all the tires that are being produced. So the challenge there is, there are only so many turf fields being built, playgrounds being built, so much flooring being deployed. So it's more and more, growth of those markets and innovation to allow that market to grow. Now, the good news, is those highest value markets are growing the fastest. Actually, where we have some of the biggest problem is probably in the energy recovery space, where that's been a big piece of this market for a long time. It has ups and downs based on what's happening in the energy markets. But as you see that go down, there's risk that gets displaced. If there's not a recycling destination for that to go to, it gets displaced by landfill. So while we have, things moving in the right direction, but not fast enough on recycling, we have risks, in sort of the other pieces of the market that could actually push us backwards.
Thank you. we had, yes. Yeah, please.
Hi. So for the last year, I've had this little side project of working on some marketing for some recovered carbon black. And I know someone who's working on a greenfield tire pyrolysis project. Question is, recovered carbon black is kind of difficult to move, whereas the pyrolysis oils are probably more standard and easier to move. So can someone have a financially viable model just relying on the sales of the pyrolysis oil without monetizing the carbon black?
That's an interesting question. I don't know that I can only speak for myself. If anybody on the stage has, deeper perspective on that, please supplement. But, generally speaking, obviously it's an easier business model if you can monetize both products. We've been involved, for probably a decade plus in the pyrolysis space and using the co-products coming out of that process. We've seen different trends there was a time when these companies thought they were going to make it work based on the oil and forgot about the carbon black. There was a time when they were knocking on our door trying to make the business model work based on the carbon black. The oil market, took off first in Europe, with US following to a degree. So you've had a lot of, volatility and ups and downs across both of the co-products. If it were me, my money, my business, I certainly would be focused on trying to make something out of both of them. The carbon black, I think, is harder, right? And we are direct users of that, so know it well. There's a challenge in the sense that everything that's being produced is low volume, and none of it is the same as what's coming out of the next plant. So the R&D overhead, the production overhead to be able to deal with that in terms of segregated material handling and storage and things like that, really sort of proliferates and becomes a challenge on the production side. So I recognize, there are significant challenges there. But it's, in my view, the path forward needs to be monetizing both.
Yeah, the industry is ready to buy. It's ready to buy with the right specs. And today we have a hard time with the specs because it seems carbon black is virgin carbon black and recycled carbon black are the same. Not really today. So we have to make sure we close the gap. If there's any gaps, it will be harder to scale it up. Closing the gaps needs technologies needs investments, and there's an entire chain. But we are ready to buy tons of recycled carbon black. If we are not there yet, it's because there is no scale. But we'll get there. I think we'll get there. So we have a program in Europe with Enviro. Yes, there's hiccups, obstacles to be removed, but we'll get there. We have programs in Asia. We have programs in South America. And we have programs in the US. So we will get there. Is it sustainable? It will be. But as any innovation, we're talking about innovation, it's hard. It looks easy on paper, very difficult in reality. But if we remove all these obstacles, we will get there. Because the reason is we are ready to buy. And at the end, innovation is about customer. And we are, all the industry is a customer for this product.
Thank you, Olivier. We have a question, I believe, over there.
Hi. This question is mainly for the steel side of tire industry. Over the years, as an equipment provider, seeing an increase in demand for machines to densify the tire wire after the tires have been broken down and the steel has been separated.
I'm having a hard time hearing.
Pertaining to the Michelin recipe video, I noticed that in creating the tire, there wasn't any use of steel in that particular video. And what I saw for the vision for 2050 as well, I didn't see anything for steel. So the question is, my part is that part of your focus to eliminate the need for steel in the tires? I know you need it for structural reasons, but it looks like from what I'm seeing that is possibly an intention to kind of, use more rubber or hardened rubber or in some manner in your recipe to remove or eliminate or lessen the steel content. That's my question to you, especially for that, pertaining to that Michelin video that we saw.
So we need steel. I don't remember exactly like in a giant mining tires, 5 tons, 1 ton of steel. And if you think 20, 30, 40, and 50, we'll still need 1 ton of steels. And then this steel will be step by step replaced by recycled steel. The thing, we cannot redo a closed loop because part of the steel we are using is special specifications. Plus we have additional copper and a couple of layers to stick with the rubber. So we buy more and more recycled steel, and it's one of the easiest recycled material to buy because it's at scale. The industry is fully at scale. They have the technologies and we are ready to purchase them. So steel, I think, is a sort of no-brainer. Back to my example of giant mining tires, it will remain at 1 ton per tire, 1 ton of steel. So it's huge. And it's true for passenger car and light truck. It's true for any type of product. So steel is critical.
Thank you.
So you want to add something, Nick, or?
No, I agree. I think if you think about sort of substitute, structural materials, and I think probably a lot of this group knows this well, but as you get into lighter duty, and passenger and light truck tires, fiber is used extensively in the place of where steel is used in truck tires and sort of upwards in terms of low duty. But I think to Olivier's point, that's not something we see changing significantly in the relevant time horizon.
Gary.
So I'm going to make several comments. Gary Champlin Tire Recycling, 35 years in the business. We do, the gentleman here on the end, we also take chrome rubber and polymers and extrude and make products and different things. Looked at paralysis for the last 25 years. I'm glad you're open. I'm glad you're bring it, hit our specifications. We'll buy it. Other than some hard R&D stuff, small scale, I've never seen that ever been approach here in the United States where it could scale and be economical. It's just never happened. Several $1 billion spent in it. Not excited about subsidized markets. They're not long term. And if the geopolitical changes or whatever, it's all got to be pulled through. That's how the drive has to be. Yes, we need to get there, but the answer isn't just saying we're open for business. That doesn't get us there. So I think we need to put our heads together and go the next step and figure this out. House has been around since World War II. I mean, it's even on tires. And so we're always getting there, but we never get there. So I think that's the big to crack. Gentlemen down here on the end, I respect what you're doing. Sounds like you're not doing it 5th or 4th subsidies, which is great. There may be some grants involved, especially if you're doing a lot of local government stuff or something like that on the purchase side, which is fine with me. I mean, that's great. That's market stimulus, trying to get there. But I do think our manufacturers are key. EPR is not an answer, but I know there's countries, Michelin and Bridgestone Firestone, there's some EPR out there that tries to direct different things. But I think seriously, if we want to get serious about this, rather than say we're open for business, let's get to the business. Okay. I have no question.
So, Gary, I just want to make sure we can bring them back again, okay? Dave.
I'll let Chris Nelson of Connecticut know that he's now a country.
Thank you. I'm just amazed at the depth of the panel that we put together this morning. We have an educator and 2 big tire manufacturers. And thank you, sir, for being here. This is fantastic. I had a question. You had brought up a point about the expense of what goes on. Do the tire manufacturers feel an obligation to spend the R&D dollars for the end of life recycling? Is there a obligation to do that up front because of the cost, or no?
To spend money to increase our usage of recycled materials? Obligation is an interesting way to think about it. I think, in a very literal sense, the answer to that is no. However, I know certainly us at Bridgestone, I know at Michelin as well, that money has been spent, that work has been done. And I think it's, we really at Bridgestone think of using our customers as our compass and doing what we think serves them the best. And in some cases, doing what Ford did, looking down the road, even if they're not asking for it yet. And our recycled material use actually is a really good example of that, where, these things don't happen fast. We've been doing the R&D for a long time. We've actually been using the materials for a long time without talking about it a lot. And we now, are hearing more and more about it from our customers. And it sort of starts at the biggest and most sophisticated customers. We're hearing about it from big fleets. They're wanting to know about the materials we're using. They're wanting to know about what happens to the tires when they're pulled off of their fleet vehicles. So, we, I think within our business have done a good job historically reading those tea leaves and sort of getting there before our customers did, so that we can now, serve those needs. So obligation, no, but a responsibility as we think about serving our customers well, sort of an incentive to tackle these things. Yes.
Thank you. Good answer. Thank you.
And if we think globally, global, local, in Europe, there is more and more trends to move toward a certain obligation. And in Europe, we have a collaboration. All together, we work on a digital twin. So a sort of digital passport where you have the content of each of the product. It's not only related to tires, but we have a content of the product which would be very transparent. Then, so is to build the infrastructure of the digital twin. So all the digital traceability, which is not easy. So it requires some technologies, tips and everything. And then it's all about as well definition. Maybe you didn't see, but Nick is talking about 39%, and I was talking about 32%. Are they better than we do? I think we are pretty similar, but the way we calculate it is slightly different. If I'm not mistaken, you integrate all the retreading, so this extension of the life for truck tires, which we don't. So there's a question of making sure that we have the same definition when we report this kind of recycled material content will be super important. And then we have the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure, to make it fully automated, because we cannot count one by one. It's a question of scale. But it's a very good question. Today, no, tomorrow, maybe it's coming. It's coming because we want the industry to progress. It's not, we are, Bridgestone and Michelin, we are leaders, clearly, worldwide. Clearly. The thing is, we want the industry to progress, not only us. So, good question. Thank you very much for...
Carrie, would you like to...
I want to build off of that. I think it is really important. We're seeing it. I made the joke about Ford was saying, hey, people want faster horses. But at the same time, you are already at 30% and you're growing that. But there's also, I think, a lack of understanding in the customer, right? When I asked, where does my tire disposal fee go? What does it pay? No one could tell me. And of course, I'm a geek, so I asked that question when I handed over my old tires and I got my new ones, and I couldn't get an answer because they didn't know. And so that idea that if someone says, hey, it goes toward R&D to figure out how we can do rubberized asphalt, which means fewer potholes. Whoa, now I'm excited. I mean, I don't need to even be in the tire industry to know I want fewer potholes. Even though there's a lot more to it, there's a lot more into the science of it, right? You can get people behind this quickly, but you also have other industries that don't benefit from rubberized asphalt as well. And so that idea of really telling the story, doing the marketing piece where people understand in a very short amount of time the value that this work is producing, I think that's something that needs to be done. There definitely needs to be more R&D. We definitely need to work on margins, but we also need to work on communicating it so other people get as excited as those that are spending all their time doing it. Good example you brought up, right? Of understanding if my tire stop is actually having a problem because it isn't the quality, I might not know that. I just bought the cheapest version, but being able to understand that different countries have different standards and there is a value to that. Most people don't want things leaching into their water. But if they don't have the understanding and can't grasp it really quickly, I do a lot with scientific literacy. And how do you put that into a business model? Because we lose customers or we lose our differentiation if we can't spend time on that. But the trick is to make it a really quick aha moment. That's why I went straight to potholes, right? There are all kinds of other benefits to it, but that's the one where people go, ooh, I see the value right away.
Yes. Hi, I have a question more for the tire manufacturers.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been developing a technology for the last 6 years, more for OTR tires and investigating about micronized ambient rubber powders. And then my question to you guys is, with the new technology, AI companies like ReMA, that you can really trace that compound that is coming from specifically one tire, what reference, if it's for Michelin or Bridgestone, that you really start processing those same compounds, making it into a really fine 30, 40, 60, I don't know what mesh works for you guys. And then I see that everything is talk about like carbon black, pyrolysis. Do you guys see a future where micronized rubber powder with the technologies of AI creating a compound put back into tires?
I can,
Yeah. Olivier.
Yeah, so micronized rubber powder is an interesting thing. The challenge with MRP, micronized rubber powder, is pretty intrusive today. So there's a gap between exactly what we want and what we have. So if you want to have the same performance, and for premium brands, Michelin and Bridgestone for premium brands, we don't compromise on performances. So if you want performances, then MRP, it's just a little bit, you can put a little bit. It's single digit. Less than single digit will be hard to scale. However, if you are a basic, affordable budget brand, there's an opportunity for you. If you are in the retread industry where the performance is probably less important and because you offer basic retread, there's an opportunity here. OTR is an opportunity here for retread, for instance. But our OTR product, premium, no compromise, no trade-off, there's a limited opportunity. What about you, Nick?
Yeah, it's a similar, and you mentioned the metric already, right? But we think about, mechanized rubber, devulcanized rubber, whatever, products or terms, you're using. We think of it in terms of loading levels, and agree. I think for the most part, we're talking about single digits, even low single digits, where we can get the loadings to, without making any performance compromises. It's an interesting, I don't think that's been studied to the depth to answer that conclusively. If you can, if we're talking about a specific application, if you can bring a 4% to a 5%, is that significant? And does, specificity of the feedstock, help you get there? Maybe. I don't think we have, I don't think that's been studied sufficiently at this point.
James.
Good morning, everybody. My name's James Most, and I work for Liberty Tire Recycling. But 40 years ago, I worked for Firestone, right in college. And over the years, I've had the opportunity to be around millions of tires, and I've seen the tire change. And today, that tire sidewall is getting smaller and smaller. The tire is changing. And my question is really, I see that slide from 2050 that one of you put up there, again, great slides. When is the tire going to maybe be just a thin piece of rubber around that piece of steel that's very easily recycled? And I think, in a sense, that we build plants to recycle rubber, I'm constantly thinking about how long is there going to be that rubber tire, or when is it going to really change? As I saw in one of the slides, just a blue concept with some holes in it. So kind of my question then is, what do you see what that tire of the future going to look like? Because it affects us. Thank you.
Do you have a perspective on that?
It's your blue tire. No,
It would be blue. No.
So the blue tire is interesting because it's airless. You can not retread, but recharge the tread. So you keep the core forever, or at least the life of the vehicle. And then with the 3D printing, you recharge the thread, but it's really a vision. It's really a vision. And then 100% of the material are either recycled or renewable. So it's more a vision. That's the thing we want to go to, but it's a bit theoretical. There's a lot of innovations, small innovations. Short term for the mass of the industry, to your point, it will be lighter, less material. You save energy. We should never forget that in terms of impact on the environment, the usage is 80%. If you think about the life cycle analysis on CO2 emissions, it's all about the usage. So that's what we see on the slide as well, is eco-design for circularity and positive impact on the environment is a critical piece. And so it will stay. But then we have disruptive innovation, and I was in charge of what we call at Michelin Wheel, which is an airless solution. We were scaling up this technology, but there are some limitations. So today it's a $50 million business. We produce 100,000 units, but it's still not at scale the way we want. It will take time. It's a slow-moving industry. We heard that in terms of innovation. It's not the digital industry which go from 0 to hero in 10 to 20 years. It's incremental innovation, incremental improvement over 100 years, over this is the time frame of the automotive industry. So it will continue, I think, like that. But we are here to help to go to a better world. So 0 fossil, 100 recycled material, 0 impact on the environment, 0 CO2. So it's incremental innovation.
Thank you, Olivier. Nelson?
Yes, thanks, Genti, for leading this panel. Appreciate it. And to the panelists, great job and your willingness to go up on stage and answer questions. One question specifically for the tire manufacturers, both Bridgestone and Michelin. Do you believe that the vast majority of your customers would be willing to pay more for recycled products in the future?
Vast majority, I think we can confidently say today, no, in the future, possibly. I want to get careful that we don't, we don't start to sort of, overshare market research and things like that we do independently. We certainly believe that there are segments that exist today where there is willingness to pay. Also, I shared already that we've used recycled material for a long time without even telling anybody. I think that's not the highest and best use case for that material. So we're trying to do a better job of matching that material with the customers who care. And we are hearing that, more and more, I think, and I mentioned this already, when you get to, bigger fleet customers who have, their own sustainability goals and commitments and things like that. We're certainly hearing more appetite in that world. We're hearing more appetite from OEMs, automotive OEMs, for the same reasons, probably with higher acuity. And I think certain segments within the consumer space as well. So there are, you view those as either anomalies or leading indicators, as well as I do, but I think there are some places out there. I don't think we're in a place where it's a vast majority. And I think it's always, as it is, I've spent some time more broadly at the conference here. I think as it is broadly across industries today, the general theme for the majority is people want it, but they don't want to pay for it. Okay. Thanks.
So I can jump in. There's actually some really good market research that people will pay more if they see more value and then they hear that something's environmentally friendly, it has more recycled. In other words, if you give them two products that are the same, they'll pick the one with the environmental benefit. Or if there's an additional benefit and it costs more and one of the benefits is environmental or they're doing more recycling, then they'll choose it. But it is not, I would say, a sole differentiator. But people do like it and add value to something more expensive if it's on the list of benefits, but you're still going to have something more substantial than just it's recycled, if that makes, and all the research, and that's actually surprisingly across many, many industries, not just tires, is that idea of I'll pay more for it if I think it's green and then fill in the blank for that product, whatever it is. Well, yeah. Like if I'm looking at tires, many people find them ubiquitous. I'm sorry. We know that's not always the case, but many people are just, I need a tire. What's the cost? But I'm like, oh, this will last longer. There's less issue with whatever it is. And they do a lot in the area of recycling. It's kind of, they add it into the pile of, I feel good about the purchase. So, and oftentimes you get that also that grudge of I had to buy it anyway. At least I feel better about it. But it really depends on the savvy too. Like that's going to be a very different decision for fleet purchasing than an individual getting 4 tires. Yeah.
You do raise though, and that mirrors, again, this isn't pockets, but mirrors some of our go-to-market. Well, we have an example in the last probably 18 months, a product launch, our Turanza EV tire. So an EV focused tire, which hits a customer segment that likely cares, but willingness to pay for material circularity, still a question mark. We don't lead with that. We lead with performance and its wear, which is a challenge in EVs. It's noise, vibration, harshness. It's the core, tire product attributes that consumers care about. But in terms of directing our circular and renewable materials to the right place, we did do that for that tire. And we've got, depending on how you measure it, the mid to high 30% that we talked about across our portfolios, we've got that tire at a 70%. And we do, disclose that and market that, but it's sort of that extra kicker.
Yeah.
Where we have to do a better job. The willingness to pay is driven as a clear and compelling value proposition. And then easy communication. Today, we are not doing a very good job at communicating the value proposition or the benefits. It's difficult. It's very difficult. So that's part of the stream we have to work on. It's not only about the technology and the material. It's about as well the way we communicate to our customers and consumers. With simple words, easy to understand. And when it's done, to execute. So there's no greenwashing. There's all of that. We deliver what we promise and we communicate it clearly. And today there's a lot of progress and opportunities to be made. Yeah.
Last year, my students put together an AI bot that would literally predict the risk of greenwashing lawsuits for a massive company. I have an NDA, so I can't say the name of it. You would know it. And really it was this idea of the communications officer came to us and says, I'm so tired of fighting with the lawyers, because I don't know what my risk is. And I don't think it's a big deal. And I want to celebrate what we're doing. And they keep saying we'll be sued. And so we gave them a tool that not only couldn't analyze it right now, but in the future, the AI bot will continue to learn with every lawsuit that comes in. And why was there a lawsuit? What was settled? How long did it before it went to settle? It's not just the outcome, but the idea that we might settle out of court. How many hours, what did it cost for the lawyers to get involved to avoid greenwashing lawsuits? Because he's like, I'm willing to get a little bit of PR blowback, but I'm exhausted fighting with the lawyers. So that idea, greenwashing is a real problem, but some of it's like the boogeyman and it's abstract and some of it's real. Separating those two can actually be done with AI and with other, it's actually worth the time, in my opinion, because I've seen it work.
And I don't want to be political here, but with the new administration, there's a little bit of green camouflage. Promoting sustainability is probably not exactly the right thing. So we have to change slightly the narrative about job creation, supply chain resilience, made in America, which is all true. That's what we are doing. All the people here is because it's made in America. I mean, it's created a lot of jobs. Today, recycling for the tire industry is a $3 billion industry in the US. It will go to 4 to 5 to 6 in the future. So today the narrative is really focusing on job creation and the growth, economic growth. But it will come back. It will be rebalanced in the future. So I think green camouflage will not be something that we are doing. So there's multiple dimensions to take into account. Not easy.
No, that's a great perspective. I want to be great insights. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. One last question from me. We have discussed a lot of issues that are in our industry and a lot how we can overcome them. And I would like for this question to go back 1 year in your perspective, right? And say if I had the opportunity, right, to win that time, but what would I do today to accelerate the industry, and having in mind the collaboration between end users, open loop, closed loop, phase 1, phase 2. What is one thing today, if I had the possibility to accelerate the industry, to make that better, more efficient, Olivier mentioned it's hard to build skate, needs time, right? One thing Kerry mentioned was absolute one of the value proposition communication, right? That's something that accelerates in my perspective. I'd love your perspectives on that. One thing you would do today to make the industry better.
Oh, no, go ahead. Yeah.
I'll take one that's top of mind, probably from going through a similar reflection there. We spend a lot of time saying the end markets need to grow. And we look at sort of the big targets that are out there, what we think are the biggest pockets that can absorb material. I look back and tell myself I have not looked hard enough introspectively at our operations. It's a probably small overall impact in terms of the material we can consume, but it creates proof points for where recycled material can go. It creates a story that can, sort of, place to launch from. So, I am doing now and wish I had started longer ago looking, across our operations, whether it's in our logistics, whether it's in our retail, saying, is there flooring that should be there? Is there a map that should be there? Is there a bumper that should be there? And trying to find those proof points, which will consume some material, but hopefully also creates an example.
Olivier, you have a perspective on that?
Sure. So it's a really difficult question just to pick one thing. It's like to be an Olympic champion. There's only one thing to be an Olympic champion.
Oh,
That's very difficult, but I think it's momentum. And despite all the challenges we were talking about, thank you for the good questions saying about all this technology, it's keeping the momentum. So every day or every week, I'm sure that my agenda is well aligned with our Polo Star. So our end goal to next point, that was this kind of long-term view, which is super important. I make sure that my time is dedicated to drive progress. And then align that with the organization. So our team, Michelin as a group, and then the entire industry. The tire manufacturers, and then entire industry. And that's why I'm here. I invest 2 days to be with ReMA, and I hope ReMA will be successful in the future, and we will contribute to the success, despite challenges. That's why I'm here. So momentum and aligning our agenda with positive energy.
Thank you. Bill? I'll add on to that. Yeah, the momentum and the awareness, and it really comes down to asking the questions and the innovation and again, utilizing end of life of the tires and finding more uses for crumb rubber, and in the manufacturing and the new manufacturing processes as well. So, automating our compression molding line, because a lot of stuff you can't injection mold or you can't profile it, fruit it. So, it's really the, making the states aware, that we need to do more R&D in the universities and the corporations and all of you. So, awareness and momentum. Thank you.
Yeah.
Karen?
And that I would say really challenge, and you have to do incremental. Incremental is the bread and butter, but every now and then take time and set it aside to say what would be not incremental, what would be significant, what would be a big leap forward, and what would that look like? What would it take to get there? Because we do all this day to day, we have to, but when do we take a step back and say, what is possible? And how do we have that conversation? And oftentimes that might be pre-competitive cooperation, right? Like if we're going to leap forward with something, that's where it really takes the cooperation. We're seeing that right now in the airline industry with sustainable aviation fuel. It's not financially sustainable right now, but United has put 10 million into R&D for it. They're getting 10 million from other airlines. They're putting the money together because they know they will all benefit from it. And they're hoping to frankly sidestep some of the regulation that's probably coming their way. So this idea of how do you be strategic with innovation that can leapfrog while not ignoring the incremental that absolutely has to happen. I think challenging yourself to do that every now and then can make a difference.
Absolutely. I'll close with that if there are no other questions. Thank you very much for being here today. I appreciate it.